So now we are going to study about Machiavelli. Okay. So first, here are some of his PYQs. So basically, this is from his book The Prince. Okay, and this is a realist point of view. Okay. Then we have uh, another question about power. Okay, power is an end in itself and inquires into means that are best suited to acquire. Okay, thus separates power from morality. Basically, it is about separation of power from or separation of politics and ethics, okay, or politics and religion, okay. Then the third is Machiavelli's political philosophy was narrowly local and narrowly dated. So this tells us about basically his significance, okay, or you can say like his methodological significance, okay. Then importance of Machiavelli. Okay, same question is above. Then we have comparison between uh, Kautilya's Arthashastra and Machiavelli. Okay, then here we also study about his application of empirical method. Okay, to human affairs. Then his views on religion and politics, basically secularism. Okay, so first we are going to read about his significance. Okay, so these two questions talk about his significance. So here is what first we are going to learn about his significance or concern, then secularism and morality, then statecraft and power, then empirical methods and comparison with Kautilya. Okay. So now we are going to give two introductions, okay, on Machiavelli, which will encompass all the themes above. Okay, so all these themes will be encompassed by the two introductions I will give here. These are two different kinds and can be used for different kinds of question. Okay, so first one is basically if the question asks about a modern realist. If the question asks about a modern realist and empirical angle. Okay, if the question is about that, then you can write this introduction that Machiavelli, hailed as the child of Renaissance, Mac means Machiavelli pioneered an empirical methodology, shifting political inquiry from normative ideals to dispassionate observations, which means empirical observations, by establishing political autonomy through dual morality, that means uh, separation of politics and ethics, okay, or separation of religion and politics, okay. His statecraft mirrors Cortelian realism and lays foundation for modern political science, okay. So this also you can use if a comparison is asked between Cortelia and Machiavelli, okay. Then this second one is for basically if any question is asked on contextual and scientific statecraft angle, okay. Okay. So this and also okay. So as a discoverer of political autonomy, Machiavelli synthesized historical observation with power dynamics. Okay, which means historicism. He used historicism in order to justify power dynamics, rejecting utopianism. That is the utopianism is basically the tradition of Aristotle. Okay, Machiavelli. Sorry, not Machiavelli. Aristotle and Plato. Okay, so he rejected Plato's utopianism and he formulated a scientific statecraft centered on virtue and reason of state. Okay, that is raison d'etat. Okay, So with this introduction is over. So now we are going to learn about his significance. Okay. So questions are asked on his significance. Okay, his significance and his critique. Okay. So first we will see what works he had. Okay, which were basically the Prince. So this work of Machiavelli was the beginning of political realism. Okay, in political science. Okay, then discourses which is on based on civic republicanism. Then then okay, so these two are basically his works. Then we will learn about his concern. Okay, in short. So what was happening during that time in Italy? So basically, in the medieval in Italy, the medieval age was coming to an end, and the modern age was about to begin. Okay, so what was happening is nation states were emerging. Okay, and Italy was divided. So Italy was basically divided into five principalities. Okay, and it was very corrupt. Okay, and especially it was corrupt due to feudal lords and church. Okay, and the reason was for the massive amount of corruption was that there were multiple. Okay, there were multiple centers of power. Okay, so pluralistic centers of power. Okay, so and Machiavelli also saw that stable political authority was necessary for social cohesion of Italy and moral regeneration. Okay, then his significance of Machiavelli. Okay, so here we'll learn about that why Machiavelli is narrowly dated. Okay, or thinks very narrowly conceptually. Okay, so first the question is is Machiavelli a reactionary thinker whose ideas were bound to the 16th century Italian city-states, or is he a universal political philosopher who laid the foundation of modern political realism and statecraft? Okay, so Machiavelli was a complex thinker. Okay, then why he was complex? Because uh, he he was subjected to conflicting interpretations. Okay, means he was a elusive and enigmatic thinker. Okay, and he cannot be labeled as someone who is democratic or monarchist, okay, or authoritarian or secular, okay. So cannot be labeled as democratic or monarchist, okay, or theocratic or anything else, okay. Then, so first, why he is significant is because he gave the concept of European, or he gave the European model of secularism. Okay, so what he basically did was he separated church and state. Okay, we'll learn about this later. Okay, and he also represents the interests of bourgeois class. Okay, or the emerging bourgeois class. Okay, then he is also considered as the father of real politics, father of real politics, or what you called it as realism. Okay, and similar in India, it was Kautilya. Okay, so Machiavelli's realism was unapologetic. Okay, in an unapologetic manner. Okay, then you can also call him as champion of nationalism. Okay, he favored nationalism. He favored statecraft. Okay, then now we are going to talk about Sabine, who commented on Machiavelli that Machiavelli is narrowly dated and narrowly located. Okay, so why Sabine criticizes Machiavelli for being narrowly dated and narrowly located? Okay, so first is narrowly narrowly dated argument. Okay, which was his ideological limits. The other is narrowly located. Okay, which were his contextual limits. Okay, so now why Sabine thinks that Machiavelli is narrowly rated. Okay, so according to Sabine, Machiavelli lacked a grand systematic philosophy of history, ethics, or sociology. Okay, so according to him, Machiavelli Machiavelli's political prescriptions were tailored specifically to the moral decay of Italy. Okay, and he also criticizes that Machiavelli focused almost exclusively on individual ruler virtue, okay, and military force. So basically, he lacked systemic theories of legal sovereignty or constitutional rights, which later became or which later defined the modern political theory. Okay, so his criticism was that Machiavelli's prescriptions or his ideology was only limited to the decay or during the old or medieval aged Italy. Okay, and he also criticizes that Machiavelli focused only on individual ruler and military force, and not on modern political concepts like rights, okay, sovereignty, okay, etc. Then, why he is narrowly located? First criticism is that Machiavelli's Prince was written to address political fragmentation of Italy, okay, which made it vulnerable to foreign invasions, okay, from France or from Spain, okay. Then his remedies that he gave in the book of Prince, okay, were direct responses to corrupt politics. Okay, so this was basically what Sabine meant. Okay, but but as you can see that Machiavelli also has universal significance. Okay, we have listed some above. Okay, this one. All these are also his significance, and I will give some else also. Okay, so first is given by Lasky. He calls Machiavelli as the child of Renaissance. Okay, Why he calls him the child of Renaissance is because he embodied the transition from medieval to modern. Okay. Then he shifted focus of political inquiry from divine providence to human agency. Focus shifted from political inquiry from divine providence to human agency. Okay. Then another thinker is, or another significance is his autonomy of polity. So Benedetto Corsi, Crossi, okay. So he commented that Machiavelli was for the first thinker to explicitly assert that politics operates under its own distinct logic, okay, which means that, or under its own distinct logic, independent from Christian ethics, okay, which basically means that he separated what he separated politics from ethics, okay, and his that uh, distinct logic was that raison d'etat, okay, raison d'etat or reason of state, okay. Then he is the pioneer of modern realism, pioneer of modern realism, okay. So basically, why we call him as the pioneer of modern realism, his concept of virtue and fortuna, okay. Then his like his stress or his focus on national security, okay, and power maximization became the foundation pillar of classic realism in modern IR, okay. Then exponent of civic republicanism. So in his book Discourses, on, or in his book Discourses, he basically favors civic republicanism, rule of law, okay, and civic participation, which later influence thinkers like Rousseau. Okay, then after this, we are going to study about. So basically, his significance is over. Now we are going to study about his methodology. Okay, so what was his methodology? Okay, what methods he used? Okay, to evolve political science. Okay, so his methodology. Okay, so basically here we have to think that how Machiavelli broke, or how did Machiavelli break away from the normative deductive methods of Plato and the medieval theologians to pioneer an empirical, inductive, and value free approach to political science. Okay, so in his methodology, we have to know how he shifted from normative approach to an empirical, inductive, and value free approach. Okay, so basically, if we compare the likes of Plato and Machiavelli, okay, or their methodology, so you take normative tradition, which was given by the likes of Plato or Aquinas, okay, so so Machiavelli broke away from this, okay, Machiavellian breakthrough. So what is there, or what question is asked in the normative tradition? It is asked basically what ought to live, okay, how men ought to live. Okay, so this was the question which was asked, which was basically metaphysical or ethical in nature. Then Machiavelli actually broke through this tradition and asked the question that how men actually live. Okay, okay, and this was basically his empirical, okay, historical approach. Okay, then So basically, what was Machiavellian breakthrough? That was empirical observations reaffirmed by history. Okay, so he took a cyclical understanding of history. Okay, in order to form an impression of what is yet to come, and we ought to consider what is already past. Okay, and his another methodology was study of human psychology. Okay, which we'll learn again later. Okay, so now we are going to read about, in short, okay, so why he is called, or why Machiavelli is called as the child of Renaissance. Okay, so here by Lasky told that Machiavelli was the child of Renaissance. Okay, then why? So first thing, what are the features of Renaissance? Okay, they are rationality and science. Okay, then second is a new human. Okay, a new human who is basically ambitious, seeking glory, and does not look at this world as evil. Okay, and the third feature is rise of modern states. Okay, then geographical exploration. So now these are the basically four features. Okay, now why Lasky, Harold Lasky calls Machiavelli as the child of Renaissance. So first thing is about rationality and scientific temper. Okay, so basically Machiavelli shifts from medieval scholasticism, okay, to modern realism. Okay, and modern realism is a kind of skepticism. You question everything. Okay, and the questioning is what develops rationality. Okay, then a new human. So basically, as I told above, divine providence was replaced by human agency. Okay, focus on humanism. Okay, then we also see the rise of modern states, and in modern states, you view the concepts like sovereignty, okay, secularism, and Machiavelli basically was a pioneer of modern states. Okay, then geographical exploration as a means to expand sovereignty. Okay, Then you can also write here national unification. Okay, so basically these all are the reasons why Lasky called Machiavelli the child of Renaissance. Okay, and Lasky also commented that the whole of Renaissance is in Machiavelli. Okay, and according to him, it is true that Machiavelli's ideas were the product of his time. Basically, he wants to tell that Machiavelli's ideas were limited to the Italy of that time, but we cannot say that they are not, they cannot be applied or universally, or Machiavelli's ideas lack universalism or transcendentalism. Okay, so here I told that Lasky, the whole Lasky commented that the whole of Renaissance is in Machiavelli. Okay, and he believes that Machiavelli's ideas do not lack. Okay, I did a mistake here. Do not lack universalism or transcendentalism. Okay, now we are going to read about Machiavelli on human nature. Okay, I know I did not give this topic as an important one, but this topic will help to answer if questions on his empirical methodology is asked. Okay, so first, his views on human nature. So his most famous line that man is selfish, coward, fickle-minded, ungrateful, fearful. Wait, ungrateful, fearful, and avaricious. Okay, so Machiavelli's conception of human nature. So Machiavelli's this conception of human nature is the cornerstone of his political realism. Okay. Now he also gives the core premise, that is his idea of universal egoism. Okay. So what is universal egoism? Okay. First, the above quote that man is fundamentally selfish, coward, fickle-minded, deceitful, okay, eager to avoid danger, and greedy of gain, okay, for gain, okay. Then you can see that man displays this nature of his in a constant phase, okay, which means that human passions like greed, fear, and ambition remain constant in history, okay. Okay, fear, then greed, ambition, etc., okay. So all these are constant across history, okay. Yeah. So universal egoism is basically constant nature of man's human ambitions, greed, okay, man's fear, okay, which remain constant across history, okay, and this constancy or this permanence is what guides what guides for the current statecraft, okay. So it is basically that leaders use historical patterns, okay. Then it is also true that individuals act well only when restrained by coercive powers, okay. The coercive power of law, okay. So basically the constant fear of punishment, okay, is what makes them or what makes individuals act well, okay. Then the second point is driver of conflict. So basically, what is the driver of conflict between humans or between states? So I'll give you some reasons. Okay. So first is the dilemma of limited goods. Okay. Then second is limitless desires. Okay. Then third, fear versus love. So Machiavelli basically believes that it is, like it is best to be feared, okay. It is much safer to be feared than loved, okay. Then so now basically when Machiavelli studies about human nature, okay, he sees that humans established governments, okay, with the strongest and the most courageous becoming lawgivers and leaders as so why individuals basically establish government, okay, for the reason of personal safety, okay, or sorry, and security of possessions, okay. Later you will see this same tradition or this same concept being repeated in Hobbes, okay. Then so basically like Aristotle, okay, similar to Aristotle, Machiavelli also characterized individual as a political animal, okay. So similar on the lines of Aristotle, okay. So basically why Machiavelli calls the individual a political animal. So basically, there are two reasons given by two different thinkers. So according to Aristotle, a man is political animal for the need of so man is basically political animal for the need of innate social interactions, okay, or innate sociability of human beings, okay. But for Machiavelli, man or an individual is a political animal for the reason of individual love for power and reputation, okay. So basically he wants to give that power view of politics, okay. So Machiavelli gives the power view of politics, and in this power view is basically that separation of politics from ethics, okay. But before that, we'll complete this. Then Machiavelli also highlights that individuals' love for property. Okay, so he teaches the prince that a wise prince never confiscates, he rather executes. So basically, and one more quote about man can forget the loss of his father, but the man will never forget the loss of his patrimony. Okay, patrimony or property. Okay, so basically, Machiavelli tells about property that a wise prince should never confiscate the property. Okay, because humans are deeply possessive about their properties, and he then famously quotes that man can forget the loss of his father, but not the loss of his patrimony. Okay, and basically he extends this to understanding also to women. Okay, he noted that men are equally possessive and protective for their women. Okay, so first is Sabine. Okay, Sabine calls Machiavelli narrowly local or located and narrowly dated. Okay, we have read why he calls him uh, this. Okay, or views Machiavelli from this perspective. Okay, then Rousseau. Then, according to Rousseau, he contested Machiavelli's pessimism, arguing that Machiavelli neglected the human capacity for empathy and collective virtue. Okay, so despite the criticism, his work or his analysis in the foundation of modern realpolitik, okay, prioritizing state survival over abstract morality. Okay, he is praised for this. Okay, then he gives advice to the prince. Okay, so what advice he gives that, or what qualities the prince should have. Okay, he tells that. So first he he defines humans. He defines humans are simple and easily deceived. Okay, and easily deceived by immediate needs. Okay, so according to him, a ruler must adapt to his nature. Okay, so in order to adapt to this nature, the ruler must either be the lion or the fox. Okay, lion basically means that use of force to manage the populace. Okay, and fox means cunningly or use cunning to navigate the deceitful nature of rivals. Okay, so according to him, so in his work Prince, okay, he comments that Prince should be clever like fox and brave like a lion. Okay, later this was refined by elitist theorists like Robert Dahl, okay, Mosca, Pareto, okay, and here, right, then here, if you compare Plato versus Machiavelli, you will see that there is a continuity regarding the qualities required to be a philosopher king or to be a prince, okay, and the qualities are based on knowledge of human psychology and history, okay. Then here he also advised or advises the prince that it is better for prince to be feared than to be loved, okay. So basically, according to him, love is a fickle bond that men break for self-interest, whereas fear is maintained by the dread of punishment which never fails, okay. But the prince must avoid being hated, okay. So in order to be to not to be hated, okay, he must not do things like confiscate property, okay, then confiscate women of his subjects, okay. Then his views on dual morality, okay, that ends justify the means, And here means mean any means, okay? He can use humans also as a means to justify his end, okay? Which was criticized or which is criticized by Kant, okay, and other thinkers as well, like Gandhi, okay? So this is a basically consequentialist approach to politics, okay? Then he also comments on the use of religion, okay, that how a prince should use religion, okay. So according to him, religion should be used as, or to be used as, a political tool, okay, to instill discipline, okay, and secure or ensure obedience of the masses, okay. Then he also advises the prince to master virtue and fortuna, okay. So basically, what he means by master virtue and fortuna, okay. So virtue is basically the masculine political agency, okay, which basically means male testosterone, okay, skill and drive, okay, to dam the river of fortuna, okay, the river of fortuna. So here fortuna means unpredictable fate or bad luck, okay, or chance, okay. So basically he means that whatever the circumstances be, uh, the prince should be able to stop the bad luck or the unpredictable fate, okay. That means, so basically he uses the analogy, okay, that fortuna is basically a river, okay, river of fate, okay, and virtue is basically the dam on the river, okay. So if the dam is strong, then the river won't flood, okay. So basically that is what he means, okay. And here the virtue of Machiavelli differs from the Greek tradition, okay, classical Greek and Roman tradition, okay. So virtue of Machiavelli is morally and ethically neutral. So basically, he wants to tell that the virtue, according to Machiavelli, or the virtue of Machiavelli, is morally and ethically neutral, which is different from the Greek or Roman tradition, okay, classical Roman tradition, which is moral, okay. Then, as I explained you, the fortuna, okay, and virtue analogy, okay. You can use the same in the exam, okay. And one more point here is that Machiavelli does not believe in fatalism, okay. Mm. So with this, his advice to the prince, and also the concept or the theory of virtue and fortuna is over, okay. After this, we'll read about his dual morality, okay. So now, after completing Machiavelli's views on human nature, so now we are going to read about his view on ethics and politics, okay. So basically, role sorry, role of ethics in politics, that is his concept of dual morality, okay. And this topic is the most important topic in if you are reading Machiavelli, okay. So first is his view, okay, his realist view that in politics ends justify the means, okay. So basically this is his political view, okay. So this view of his is consequentialist in nature or teleological, okay, in nature, okay. So the similar view was shared by sophists, okay. So according to McIntyre, Machiavelli judged actions solely in terms of their consequences, okay. So we can compare him to to Plato and Immanuel Kant, okay. So he is not deontological, okay, like Plato and Kant, okay. So according to him, The key thing was that basically separation of politics and ethics. Okay, so according to him, he quotes that political actions to be judged on political parameters and not ethical parameters. Okay, so basically what he did was he did a strict separation. Okay, a strict separation of politics from traditional ethics and religion. Okay, so this concept is broken down into two distinct moral spheres. Okay, so this is broken down into two distinct moral spheres, that is public morality, okay, and private morality. Okay, so basically public or political morality, okay, operates under its own logic. Okay, so basically it operates under the logic of raison d'etat. Okay. Here, the standard of an action is not whether it is good or evil in religious sense, but whether it is effective in acquiring and expanding and maintaining power, okay, to ensure state survival. Okay, so basically, he views public morality in an from a utilization perspective. Okay, such that public morality should be such which helps state maintain power. Okay, so this is his view of public morality. Then according to him, or private morality, so basically this is the realm of Christian ethics. Okay, traditional Christian ethics. Okay, and these ethics or Christian ethics are governed by virtues such as honesty, compassion, empathy, humility. Okay, all these. Okay, then they might be desirable as individuals. Okay, these it means that these virtues of honesty and all. Okay, they may be desirable for individuals, but Machiavelli here argues that a ruler should who adheres strictly to this morality in political arena, okay, necessarily come to grief among those who are not virtuous. Okay, so basically he is against, okay, private morality in public sphere. Okay, he thinks that if you show traits of private morality in public sphere or in the political arena, okay, you it will bring grief, okay, to the state. Then here he also rejects the idea of absolute good, that is basically relativism. Okay, and for him, morality should be basically situation specific. Okay, okay. Then for him or for Machiavelli, politics was an end in itself. Okay, so this is basically a distinction from the earlier thinkers like Aristotle or Plato, who believed that politics as a means to higher goals like justice or truth. Okay, unlike Plato, for whom unlike Plato, for whom politics was a means to attain justice or truth. Okay, or truth. Okay, so if he is like morally relative, okay, then he advises the prince, okay, to keep changing his color, okay, change colors like a chameleon, basically. Okay, so he advises the prince to be like situation to have morality which is situation specific. Okay, if the situation tells the prince to have the mind of a fox, then so be it. Okay, and if it requires the mind of a lion, so this the prince should be able to switch. Okay, he should not be restricted towards a universal standard. Okay, of morality. Then, what are the key features? Okay, now what are the key features of dual morality? Okay, so first is ends justify the means. Okay, then which means that Machiavelli is contextualist. Okay, as I told above. Okay, he judges political actions solely by their outcomes rather than their intrinsic moral quality. Okay, if for example, if basically the end of a state, okay, the end of a state is preservation of that state. Okay, then the prince is justified to use methods that would even violate the private morality. Okay, then second, autonomy of politics. So basically what he does that he establishes politics, okay, as an independent discipline. Okay, Here, he basically what he basically does is that he liberates politics from medieval scholasticism. Okay, then necessary evil. Okay, another feature is necessary evil. So what it basically means here is that a successful prince must possess the virtue, okay, to be morally flexible. Okay, okay. So basically, the prince should have the political skill and agency to be morally flexible and be prepared to commit necessary evils. Okay, when the security or of the state is at risk. Okay, for national interest. Okay, even if prince has to kill for national interest, it is justified. Okay, according to Machiavelli. Then, then we also, if we compare, okay, comparison with idealism, so we see two thoughts here. First, about idealism. So basically, for Plato, okay, political authority to moral wisdom. Okay, so according to Plato, politics should be a journey from moral authority to moral, political authority to moral wisdom. Okay, but but Machiavelli, on the other hand, views that rule is about power. Okay, so Machiavelli does not believe in moral wisdom. Okay, so basically that comparison where Plato treats here Plato treats the state as a means to an end. Okay, whereas Machiavelli treats the state as an end. Okay, then here here we are going to write two commentaries, okay, or criticisms or evaluation, okay, given by the scholars. Okay, so first is Ebenstein, who commented that Machiavelli is not a nihilist, okay, but rather implies amorality in specific situations. Okay, so basically, what Ebenstein means is that Machiavelli is not a nihilist. It means that basically Machiavelli is not someone who believes in nothing. Okay, but rather implies that amorality. Okay, so what Machiavelli says that you should not be moral or you should change morality. Okay, morality should be flexible according to situations. Okay, then second is Gandhi. Okay, so he called Machiavellianism as satanic purity of means. Okay, okay. So according to him, politics without ethics is a death trap. Okay, Mrityajal. Even Shakespeare had a play. Okay, which basically criticized Machiavellianism. Okay, then even Leo Strauss criticized Machiavelli or labeled him as teacher of evil. Okay, for his amoral stance. Okay, so basically, he Leo Strauss labeled him as the teacher of evil because Machiavelli takes amoral stances regarding the situations. Okay, then so with this dual morality concept, that is the role of ethics in politics is done, then quickly we are going to read about the role of religion. Okay, or Machiavelli's views on religion. Okay, so now we are going to study quickly about Machiavelli's views on religion. Okay, so basically his views on religion are strictly utilitarian and pragmatic. Okay, so basically he sees religion as a tool of statecraft. Okay, okay. So why he views religion as a tool of statecraft? So three reasons. So first is social glue. Okay, religion basically acts as a vital social glue necessary for maintaining order, social cohesion, and moral regeneration. Okay, then instilling obedience. Okay, so basically, he argues that rulers should use religious beliefs strategically to create a sense of moral duty and fear of divine punishment. Okay, because basically humans fear punishment. Okay, so using punishment, he wants to instill obedience or discipline in the populace. Okay, then for managing perceptions. Okay, here also religion plays a crucial role. Okay, so he viewed religion not as an end but as a means. Okay, as a means for what? Raison d'etat. Okay, for the welfare of the state. Okay. Hmm. Then he was a critique of Christianity. Okay, critique of Christianity. So basically, Machiavelli believed that Christianity eroded or erosion of virtue. Okay, so according to Machiavelli, Christianity made men effeminate, charitable, and weak. Okay, and due to this, men lost their or eroded their virtue. Okay, and basically, the second reason was that conflict with political needs. Okay, so Christian morality was in conflict uh, with the political needs of the state. Okay. Hmm. So basically, it, as you know, it eroded the virtue. Okay. So basically, what he wants to tell here is that conflict with political needs, basically the virtue, okay, erosion of virtue led to the the strengthening of fortuna. Okay, erosion of virtue, strengthening of fortuna. Okay, basically he wants to tell that men preferred more or yeah, preferred more of divine. Okay, that means he's trying to tell that men preferred fatalism. Okay, Christian men. Then political fragmentation. He specifically blamed the Roman Catholic Church for keeping Italy divided, corrupt. Okay, and preventing unification. Okay, so here Basically, Machiavelli was anti-church, okay, anti-clergy, but not anti-religion. Okay, okay. Then so here also Machiavelli kept a strict separation between church and state. Okay, and this led to the beginning of European model of secularism. Okay, then the third point is secularism and autonomy of politics. Okay, so what basically so Machiavelli as pioneer of European secularism. Okay, then primacy to state. Okay, that means that politics have no relation to morals. Okay, and raison d'etat. Okay, is the biggest or the highest priority. Okay, then you can also mention other thinkers here like who criticized the role of religion in politics. Marx. Okay, then Gramsci. Basically opium of masses. Okay, then intellectual class who manufactured power or who manufactured or maintained power. Okay, then yes. So with this, uh, Machiavelli's views on religion is completed. Okay, so now we are going to read about Machiavelli's views on foreign policy, war, and violence. Okay, not much of an important topic, can be used as value additions in IR or uh, any other topics where realism is asked. Okay, so he believed in expansionist foreign policy. Okay, similar on the lines of Cordelia. Okay, then we quote here Hegel, who comments that war is a positive movement wherein the state asserts itself as an individual. Okay, as an individual asserting its rights and interests. Okay, then so Machiavelli also believed that violence or use of violence as a shock therapy to cure corruption and rejuvenate virtue. Okay, then he also established that violence not to be used for private reasons. Okay, by state. So the state should not use violence in order to subjugate someone or in order to exploit someone privately. Okay, in the private capacity. Okay, then uh, he also cautioned against excessive generosity. Okay, he believed that it made the state weak. Okay, then he also believed that neutrality was impossible. Okay, and if there is a rebellion, okay, so it should be crushed completely. Okay, or else there will be retaliation. Okay, so nothing much to explain here. Then his idea of civic republicanism in his book Discourses, he gives this idea of civic republicanism. Okay, so in Prince, in his work Prince, he supports monarchy. Okay, whereas in Discourses, he supports a republican form of government. Okay, so why so? Okay, so according to him, if the society is corrupt, okay, then he supports monarchy. Okay, he suggests the rule of iron hand. Okay, then if there is civic sense, okay, if the citizens are virtuous, okay, they have civic sense, okay, then and they have responsibility, then he favors the republican form of government, okay. But he also says that wherever monarchy possible, okay, wherever monarchy necessary, and wherever republicanism possible, but no, in no situation is, but in no situation oligarchy or aristocracy, okay. So he is against oligarchy and aristocracy. Why? Because they are feudal lords, okay. And thus Machiavelli becomes a scholar of emerging capital class, okay, emerging capitalists, okay. So with this, civic republicanism is also over. After this, we are going to compare between Machiavelli and Cordelia, okay. So now let's compare Machiavelli and Cordelia, okay. So I've made a table. So the first thing or the first point of comparison is the historical context, okay. So basically, Kautilya was in the 4th century, okay, a Mauryan empire who focused on consolidating and consolidation of a vast empire, okay. And Machiavelli was during the Renaissance period in Italy, okay, who focused on immediate national unification and stability, okay. So we won't track this because it is very easy. Then, and not much of a relevance. Then core philosophy. Okay, so what is the core philosophy of Kautilya? So the core philosophy of Kautilya is realism grounded in dharma. Okay, so basically what it means that governance serves the welfare of subjects. Okay, so the famous quote by Kautilya: "In happiness of his subject lies the king's happiness." Okay, okay. So basically, welfare of subjects. Okay, so governance serves only one purpose, that is welfare of the subjects. Okay, then when we see Machiavelli or Machiavelli's realism, it is a secular kind of realism. Okay, or secular realism. Okay, so what Machiavelli establishes is raison d'etat. Okay, which means reason of the state or autonomous politics. Okay, that means politics independent from or independent of wait, politics independent of private ethics. Okay. So first we have understood the core philosophy of Cordelia and Machiavelli and how they differ. Okay. Then the second point is the nature of statecraft. Okay. So use of nature of statecraft. Okay. So uses of things like Sam, Sam, Dam, Danda, Danda. Okay. Sam, Dam, Danda, Bhed. Okay. That means using any methods. Okay, for the flourishment of state or statecraft. Okay, like conciliation. Okay, then gifts to enemies. Okay, then force, etc., etc. Okay, then what was Machiavelli's nature of statecraft? Okay, so Machiavelli basically uses the metaphors of fox and the lion. Okay, to manage power. Comparatively, Cortelia's nature of statecraft is very or heavily realist, okay, as compared to Machiavelli. Okay, then ethics and religion. Okay, the role of ethics and religion. So basically, Cortelia treats dharma as foundation of a just state. Okay, and also, okay, religion is integrated. Okay, religion is not separated from the social and ethical fabric. Okay, so religion is also a part of the statecraft. Okay, then according to Machiavelli, religion as instrument of statecraft. Okay, or a tool of statecraft. Okay, to instill discipline and obedience. Okay, so Machiavelli separates religion, okay, or Machiavelli has a utilitarian approach or towards religion for statecraft, okay, and Cortelia has a deontological approach, okay. Then the next point of difference is institutional scope, okay. So basically, So which thinker was more comprehensive? So Kautilya. Okay, comprehensive. Okay, so basically, why he is comprehensive? Because he gave a detailed manual. Okay, detailed manual on economy, infra. Okay, then finance, then international relations. Okay, etc. etc. So that is why Kautilya's uh, institutional scope is very comprehensive and very broad as compared to Machiavelli, who whose institutional scope was leadership centric. Okay, which means that Machiavelli primarily focused on military, comma, political survival and virtue of leaders. Okay, or virtue of the individual leader. Okay, then on human nature. Okay, on on human nature. So basically, so Kautilya acknowledges, wait, one, two, three, four, five. Yeah. So Kautilya acknowledges human weakness and greed as political realities. Okay, as political realities that require management. Okay, then according to Machiavelli. Okay, so basically Machiavelli holds a deeply pessimistic view. Okay, deeply pessimistic view on human nature. Okay, then his famous quote on human nature. Okay, that man is selfish, fickle-minded. Okay, deceitful and greedy. So this. Okay, then his views on espionage. Okay, so basically he had a extensive system of spies. If you have read history, you will come to know. Okay, so these spies worked on both domestic and foreign level. Okay, or in domestic and foreign intelligence. Okay, then Machiavelli also emphasizes the need for cunning to recognize traps, okay, and conspiracies. Basically, he advises Prince, okay, to be a fox, okay, because fox is cunning, okay, okay. So with this, the comparison is done. Now we are going to write some critical views or evaluations, okay, on Machiavelli and Cordelia, okay, and then after that we are going to conclude it, okay. So some value addition points, you can call them. First, Max Weber, okay. So according to Max Weber, okay, in his work, politics as vocation, as an vocation, okay, as a vocation, sorry. So what Max Weber identifies is that, or he famously remarked that compared to Cortelia's naked realism, comma, Machiavelli's prince is harmless. Okay, so Max Weber praises Cortelia's realism as being more accurate, okay, as compared to Machiavelli's, okay, or more harsh as compared to Machiavelli's, okay. Then both, one more value addition, both thinkers rejected utopian models and favored empirical observations, empirical and historical observation. Okay. Hmm. Then you can also write that Machiavelli believes in individual virtue, okay, or emphasizes on individual virtue to master fortuna, okay. But on the other hand, Cautilia's viewpoint is different. Okay, but Cautilia believes in structural stability. Okay, or emphasizes on structural stability through his Saptang theory. Okay, and one more similarity between them is that preservation of state is the highest political duty. Okay, for both of them. So I think this much will be enough. If a question comes on comparison between Cordelia and Machiavelli, okay, then so with this we have completed Machiavelli. I will give you few concluding remarks, okay, which you can write. Conclusion. First, Machiavelli is praised for his realism and pragmatism, okay, because he took out politics out of the context of sorry he took politics out of the context of theology, okay, and he subordinated moral principles to the necessities of political existence, okay. Then you can also call him or founder of modern military science, okay. Then Benedetto Croce comments that Machiavelli is a realist or pragmatist, advocating suspension of ethics, only in case of politics. Okay, then you can also write about Skinner. Okay, so Skinner also commented that once we restore Machiavelli to the world in which his ideas were initially formed, we began appreciating we begin appreciating the extraordinary originality. Okay, then you can also quote here Dunning. So he also commented that it is a paradox that everyone is Machiavellian in politics, but no one accepts himself to be one. Okay, you can also write about Gramsci, who praised Machiavelli for his separation of politics and ethics. Okay, and one more you can write here, which I forgot about. So basically, according to him, Prince should be someone who knows the right moment. Okay, you can use this in any historical analogy as well. Okay, for example, regarding Gandhi. So first, Gandhi was a non-violent person. Then he basically accepted violence in order to make India free again. Okay, during the Quit India movement. So because he knew the moment or he knew the right moment that the British were pressured during the Quit India movement, so that is why uh, we can say that Gandhi is also someone who knew the right moment. Okay, so with this, basically, Machiavelli is over. Okay, thank you.